Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this day. Thank you for this platform that you've given us for such a time as this, to be your church, to edify, to build up, to prophesy. Thank you for Basil and Gons and their faithfulness to you, Father, in deconstructing the news and digging deeper, Father, doing the things that are so hard to do, and they do it so faithfully. I pray for their edification, uplift them, give them energy, renew their spirits, Father, as you have wonderful work set before them. And Father, I pray for all the producers of this show who you also have such wonderful works for, that as they listen, they would filter through and wonder what this means for them. How does this apply to their daily life, and how can we forever change eternity because of our faithfulness to you, Father? Thank you that you transcend time. And whether you're listening to this now, live, or far into the future, that these people would know you are there. Thank you, Father, for you are good despite what things look like. We walk by faith, not by sight. Thank you, Father. We are fearfully, wonderfully made, and we give you praise. May we have joy so deep in our heart that not even the darkest of news can deter us from smiling, singing songs, hymns, and edifying each other at all times. In the name of Yeshua and his precious blood, thank you, Yahweh.
The world is getting crazier. People are acting more and more insane. The end of the world is tomorrow. Tomorrow. There's only one thing to do when the world is falling apart. Listen to Basil and Gons as they discuss this week's news and events through the lens of Bible prophecy.
You are listening to Canary Crime News Talk.
You are listening to Canary Cry News Talk. It is August 30th. 2023, episode 661, Crash Test Martians. My name is Gons. Basil is out today. Well, let me just introduce myself. I am the director of the Age of Deceit Films, your favorite Asian provocateur for Christ, live to tape from California to bring you the best news, which is the gospel message of Jesus Christ, while reporting the egregious with a well-rounded, biblically grounded take on world events and today's emergent phenomena. Communication breakdown. All kinds of communication breakdown, from ancient history, people in modernity trying to understand the ancient past of our our Earth, or other flaming balls flying in the sky, or it's me trying to communicate with Basil on what's going on with his trip to Burning Man. Communication tends to break down quite often, and what I decided to do today is just do a short show, maybe about an hour, maybe less, and just cover a couple things that I saw out there. And obviously we can't do the full 2.5 hour or 3 hour thing today, but it's okay. We'll cover some important topics. It's going to be a little different. I suppose it's got a face like the sun feel, because I'm bringing up old stuff, A lot of times with news talk, we tend to just talk about what's in the news, and we'll certainly do that. But I think at this point, to me anyway, it feels like I've at least covered the range of things that can be covered in terms of adjacent topics concerning the end times or eschatology, whether it's genetics and DNA, or UFOs and aliens, or something in between, or hybrids, or, those are the sort of the fringier things, but also conspiracies and propaganda, mind control, and, the technocracy and the New World Order and geopolitics. And I mean, there's just so many layers to the onion that it's impossible to say that we've covered every topic that's ever known to man. I'm not saying that, but in terms of it relating to end times Bible prophecy, it feels like we've covered it, only because, not because I'm saying we did or have, but because things that pop up in the news brings up old stuff, brings up stuff that we've looked at in the past, or some researcher in our midst, our sort of fringy Christian corner, have talked about or written about extensively over the years. So today's a show like that, and I guess we'll just get right into it. Technically Basil is supposed to do the rundown. I don't even think it's worth doing a rundown today because we're just getting, there's only like 3 stories, really. 2 or 3 stories, one really main story. So let's just dive right in.
Space. Wanna go to space?
Remember the balloons? Remember the balloons? Okay. This is a story coming from, to kick things off here. Oh, I guess we're supposed to do a disclaimer. YouTube, I did see a YouTube thing trying to get people to take a class or like a little course on how to be a better community, or how to better abide by the community guidelines. And so whatever, YouTube. I know Basil gets mad because I'm putting the YouTube channel in jeopardy a little bit, but what is at this point, it's kind of like, what are you guys going to do to us that we haven't experienced already? Okay. This is coming from the Telegraph UK. Headline: China may be to blame for UFOs, says ex-head of NASA inquiry. Dr. Thomas Zurbuchen says unidentified flying objects are real and may be unfriendly advanced technology. Let me properly do the UFO jingle here.
You don't know what you're looking at.
What's driving that thing? It's not a space alien.
Aliens. It's unidentified. Aliens. Aliens. Aliens.
There's footage and records of objects in the skies that we don't know exactly what they are.
It's the Chinese, Mr. Obama. Didn't you know? Unidentified flying objects are real and may be unfriendly advanced technology, the former head of NASA's UFO inquiry has said. Former UFO NASA's. I thought NASA was just getting into their whole UFO thing publicly, but I'm not following it close enough to know that there was a NASA UFO inquiry in the past. Amid renewed interest in the unexplained phenomena, Dr. Thomas Zurbuchen, NASA's longest-serving associate administrator for the Science Mission Directorate, was asked to head up the unidentified. Last year. All right, so this is pretty close. The unidentified anomalous phenomena panel last year. He recently left the U.S. Space Agency for ETH Zurich, the renowned public university in his home country of Switzerland. After reading numerous reports and speaking to witnesses who have seen strange objects in the sky, Dr. Zurbuchen said he remains convinced there is something out there. That's quite the take there. There's something out there. He said, quote, "Not only did I talk to pilots, I talked to individuals who had sightings, and they were really convinced. I really felt they told me the subjective truth." I thought that was interesting. I really felt they told me the subjective truth, which, okay, all right. I mean, I get it. It's a subjective thing that, people are seeing things and it's a subjective experience. You're not able to give an objective explanation for what you saw, but it's kind of weird to use that word there. Okay, so there's a few things here. There's a part that I really want to get to that it really is the heart of this. Okay, let me back up. Quote, "The fact that there are unexplained phenomena is not a question for me. What they are and what they mean and how we prove they exist is something that needs more work. There could be multiple explanations. If we are looking at technology, then it may not be friendly, and that is something we should know. It could be technology from other places on Earth, and that would be pretty scary." Ooh, so scary. Xi Jinping with his UFO, so scary. Continuing the quote here. "It could be a natural phenomenon like luminescent clouds or something we've never seen before, and that would be pretty interesting. Or it could be some kind of camera problem that occurs." End quote. He said it was important to question whether Chinese spy balloons might be to blame. Chinese spy balloons.
Pat, you said that this is violating our airspace, so why not take it down?
Yeah, so, clearly as we assess options and considering the size of the payload on this, looking at the potential for debris and the impact on civilians on the ground or property damage.
Please describe America to me in one single word.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was the foothills of the...
Yeah, that's about right. The Chinese spy balloons is used as the catalyst for they might be the ones with UFOs, and if they are, that's scary. Chinese spy balloons might be to blame after one was shot down by U.S. fighter pilots in February as it crossed the Atlantic. Quote, the whole balloon phenomenon we cannot ignore, because if we ignore what we see, then we will suddenly get surprised. He added. Which is such a weird quote. It's saying nothing. It's like, if we ignore the things we can see, then they will surprise us with the things we can't see. What are we going to do? All right. So, and of course, we've covered all the balloon talk. Now, what's interesting to me is that the rest of the article here, which is pretty long, it goes through a whole bunch of stuff, has nothing to do with China. It has nothing to do with the technologies or any evidence to suggest that it belongs to China. It does report accounts of people who have seen things in the military, and there's been a lot of articles like that. But of course, I suppose they're shading it as, keep in the back of your mind, like what they might be seeing here are Chinese highly advanced craft or something like that. But really, no, to keep it objective, no objective grounded evidence here. Just the former NASA UFO board panel guy saying, might be China. Better watch out. So I thought that was weird that it would stoke that kind of thing with China. And especially, in the wars and rumors of wars, talk about rumors of wars, because in response to this, I thought this was just to note, South China Morning Post, which is the Chinese outlet here, the headline, is the U.S. about to blame UFO phenomena on China? And I'll read just a couple sentences here because it's funny. Americans like to blame China for everything, but UFOs? Seriously, this is no joke. China may be behind at least some UFO sightings, Dr. Thomas Zurbuchen claimed, according to a report in the Telegraph newspaper. Blah, 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 blah. But yeah, they're very offended that the Americans, or at least people part of NASA, would suggest that China is to blame. Okay. I'm going to jump back to the Telegraph article, because while the headline is pointing at China, and the headline is pointing at this Thomas Zurbuchen guy and his quote, there's something else talked about in this article that I was like, okay, why isn't this the big leading story? And let me try to find it here. It gives a story about, pilots being ridiculed and them seeing things, and their sightings being dismissed, and, not having any kind of progress in this regard until recently. But let me see, where is here it is. Okay. Others are more convinced that there's clear evidence of alien life, but believe space agencies and authorities are either choosing to ignore it or trying to keep it under wraps. A recent paper, remember, this is the Telegraph covering this article, or, reporting this. A recent paper published in the Journal of Astrobiology asserts that there is evidence of, quote, humanoids, bodies, bones, skulls, UFOs, and spacecraft wreckage on Mars. Okay. Now, maybe I missed it because I'm not like deep into the UFO community. But a journal, an actual paper that was published that alleges proof that there is humanoids, bodies, bones, skulls, UFOs, and spacecraft wreckage on Mars. I mean, you could be a flat earth, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's kind of like, what? Like, why are they even highlighting this strange paper? So I went and looked it up. Of course, I had to find out, what is this paper? Who is it by? And one thing I did find here is the actual link to the PDF. You guys can go to the show notes and find it. Mars, humanoids, bodies, bones, skulls, UFOs, UAPs, spacecraft wreckage. It's authored by Ron Gabriel Joseph, cosmology.com, Rudolph E. Schild, Smithsonian Institute. I thought it was a kind of an interesting last name, too. Schild. I don't know how to pronounce that. S-C-H-I-L-D, like the end of Rothschild, but take out the Roth. That's what his name is. It's Schild, Rudolph Schild, Smithsonian Institute, as well as David Duvall, Oklahoma State University, Stillwater. And I went through as much as I could of this paper, and it's kind of long and a lot of words, so we won't go through the whole thing. But I thought it was hilarious because the way they do the paper, it's very much akin to on one hand, research done by the likes of David Flynn over the years. And if you don't know who David Flynn is, he was a Christian. He died in 2012, I believe. I'm pretty sure it was the beginning of 2012. I think he had brain cancer and he passed away. I believe he was in his early 50s. But he left fantastic research on Cydonia and Mars. And I'll play some of, so I have a clip of it from one of his lectures that I'll play for everybody here in a minute. But so that's one side of what this sort of report reminded me of, this Mars humanoids bodies and all that stuff. The other side is from, and I didn't pull up all the resources here because I was trying to go live as quickly as possible today. And that is the Mars episode of Canary Cry Radio. We talked about a bunch of stuff. There was a guy that claimed he was going to become president in the future, and he was part of Project Pegasus, which was this secret space program, basically, where they took these young people and put them in a hyperdrive room that takes you to a classroom in Mars or something. And he claims that Obama was there, and they told him he was going to become president. I mean, it's just wild stuff. And the guy claimed that he had proof that there's life on Mars. And his document that was supposed to be this bombshell document was kind of weak. It was a lot of like, oh yeah, look at the rover, took these pictures, check that out. That's like a I don't know, like a spacecraft or something, or whatever, some artificial thing. And certainly there have been, and we've looked at these images, there are some weird alleged photos of Mars. Now again, you don't have to believe it's Mars. You can believe it's a desert somewhere out there, or someplace, some remote location that they're filming it, and that's entirely possible. But the psyop here to understand and to recognize is the fact that they're allowing these images to be seen by the public, and researchers within the communities that exist out there, for example, astrophysics or aerospace technology, they can look at it and they can say, oh, this has the stamp of NASA's approval on it. These are NASA photos. Why would we doubt that it's, so they won't even doubt the fact that it's real or not, but they're looking at it going, wait a minute, what is all this stuff that's being shown here? So let me show, and I'll do my best for people just listening. Recommend you actually see some of this. And some of this is old stuff. Like we've seen a lot of this, a picture of some, what looks like supposedly Martian dirt, but looks like there's like a femur looking type of bone-esque thing there. Not too convincing. There's a few of those images where, and I believe this was in one of the old episodes. We talked about this. It looks like a femur or something. So, okay, sure. And then they have, I'm not going to go through every example here, but they claim that there is evidence of wreckage, some kind of craft wreckage. And on figure 8, Sol 727 is what it's labeled here. Note, humanoid, center bottom. As also depicted here and in the following figures, the humanoid is surrounded by a ring of stones, which you can kind of see. Yeah, there's like a ring of stones, and a cratered debris field of what appears to include the wreckage of what might been, it says been right there, but been an extraterrestrial craft. The humanoid is also distinct from the underlying and surrounding terrain and was photographed approximately 100 meters from the partially buried bones. After photographing this humanoid, the wreckage, NASA turned the rover around and returned to the location where the bones were photographed and discovered more bones. And so they do a zoom of this alleged body figure, and it kind of looks like your typical, like, gray alien. If you picture a gray alien, or just kind of your Martian, your big-headed Martian, short Martian, it's got that vibe where it's got like a big head and kind of a smaller body, but it does kind of look like a body where you can make out the legs a little bit. There's kind of like a torso, but the head is humongous. I don't know what's going on with the head. They do some color correction on it to see, and certainly you can kind of see the eye sockets and the mouth, which is, again, kind of an interesting thing. Why would NASA be like, yeah, go ahead and release this? There are other photos. This one was kind of interesting too. Figure 12, wreckage from an extraterrestrial spacecraft located adjacent to the humanoid. It's hard to tell because it's zoomed in. It looks like shiny metal, like a reflecting metal of some kind, but it's really, really hard to tell because even if it was mirrored or shiny, reflecting off the whatever desert landscape or Mars landscape or whatever it is, would make it difficult to tell. It's got like a translucent quality to it. There's a few more here with the body. They claim there's some more wreckage and bones. I'm getting somewhere here, folks. Don't worry. It does get a little bit better. There's an alleged, what looks like wheels and an axle. Pretty compelling, and that's the thing that's really fascinating about these pictures forever, for the longest time, is that, you can say, oh yeah, things can naturally form, but then they show shapes where it's like, I don't think that can, they would be very hard for something like that to form. And what it looks like the bottom of a skateboard. It looks like the little axle and the wheels of a skateboard, which again, could be just a dump site. There's some kid's skateboard that accidentally got into the shot of what's supposed to be the terrain of Mars or something. But again, hard to conclude either way. I'm just sharing what these astrophysicist people are starting to do, which is take these images from official NASA pictures or images and then claiming that there is more than meets the eye or more than what is being told. So there's another body shape type of thing that they found that's more like, it is interesting because they do a side-by-side of the humanoid from earlier with the big head. And it looks like there's like an empty case or pod version of the same shape where it kind of fits the big head and whatever. So yeah, they're pointing out that it could be like a pod or some kind of, thing that they enter or something like that. A lot of 33s in here too. A few more interesting ones. Some interesting white plazoid rock, which looks out of place, if anything else. And then there's this one where, I'm going to describe what they call it, or how they describe it. Figure 27. A metal cup-like structure is attached to the front of the head and what appear to be straps and other accoutrements that might be the remnant of a helmet. A portion of the top and the side of the head appears to be missing, and the interior appears to be hollow. So they're looking at what looks kind of like just like a rock. And to be honest, it looks like a side profile view of a dog or a bear or something. Looks like a big bear mascot type of thing. Again, hard to say that it's a helmet, but sure. Okay. The astrophysicists writing papers are saying it's a helmet. There's another dog's head, anomalous brain-like mass that can be discerned. And then they talk about some of the UAPs and UFOs that were captured in the background from the Curiosity rover. And there's one where they do like an analysis of what that might be. And honestly, it looks like a giant spotlight on a movie set. I'm not kidding. It just looks like in the distant. They do a whole analysis of it. But when they try to show what it might be is sort of I don't know what I think it's called like deinterlacing or something. I don't know the exact term where there are, and they show it in movies a lot now where it's like, oh, can you clear up the pixelated image or something like that. And then they artificially, show you what it might actually be or whatever, or improve resolution via computers. And yeah, it just looks like, it looks like one of those rectangular light sources, kind of like, I have one here actually. This is I have a light source like that too, but it's square. But so it kind of looks something like that, which I thought was interesting to say the least, but yeah, not completely compelling, I suppose. Figure 33, Curiosity Hascam L camera. There's a UFO/UAP in the top right, and certainly something's there. There's something there, some smidge in the air flying. It looks kind of like a Xbox controller from a distance. So, yeah. What else is there? There's a couple more things. I forget if it was important or not. A few more artifacts that look artificial. They look like bowls. It does start looking more and more like debris of an airplane or something. Not necessarily, what you would imagine a UFO to be or something like that, but just debris of something, aircraft, helicopter, something. And they just keep going here. Oh, this one was pretty interesting. So, and again, I think this was old too. Curiosity Sol 653, anomalous objects appears artificial. It's like a tube that has 3 sort of ball-like things on it. Imagine 4 on it, but one is missing. That's kind of what it looks like. I mean, sure, the winds of Mars can form that every day. It's just a little anomaly. What else was there? I'm sorry. I'm sure this is not like the most compelling thing. I know you guys are here for news talk, but I just wanted to point out that there's this weird paper that was just published on August 11th, I believe, Journal of Astrophysics and Aerospace Technology, that's claiming that, some of these images that are from Curiosity rover on Mars are depicting humanoids and wreckage and UFOs and all kinds of stuff. All right, this is the last one I'm going to do. Figure 49, photographed by Spirit rover, skull atop burial mound. I believe, again, these are pretty old, at least been in the milieu for a while. And yeah, it kind of looks like a skull. I'll just say it. Looks like a skull helmet type thing. Hard to deny. You can see the eye holes. There's kind of like a nose, nostril type of thing going on, a cranium. And so basically the conclusion here from this long paper is, by the way, they do mention there's a spot towards the end here, extraterrestrial life, atomists versus Christian and Hebrew religious beliefs. I thought this was interesting to even include this conversation as part of the discussion here, which leads me to believe that this topic is something we should really pay attention to as a church, because ultimately, when whatever narrative they want is ready to go to the masses, it's going to be up to the church to really say, hold on, we have explanations that are very lock and step with the scriptures, and we're not going to just buy whatever narrative is being fed to us by scientists or media or whoever. So that's an important point to just kind of keep track of what's out there. And, I'm not going to read all this because it's, it's a paper, so it can be kind of boring. They talk about the Catholic Church. They talk about the Torah and the Talmudic traditions and mentions Meroz. I think I've talked about Meroz being a planet, or allegedly, according to the Talmud, a heavenly body, a star, or a planet. And, the Jewish traditions and rabbis have talked about there are, extra terrestrials, so to speak, from other planets that pre-existed us, sort of a pre-Adamic race type of narrative. And again, it gets into some nuanced conversations, because are you talking pre-Adamic like they were flesh and bone like us, or are we talking in the spirit realm, or are we talking like were things just different before the fall? Like what are we specifically talking about? And there's a lot of nuance and a lot of opinions when it comes to that. So I'm not here saying that I have it all figured out, but I'm just pointing out that they're bringing up the Jewish traditions and Orthodox Jewish religious beliefs, and rabbis, even quoting Rabbi Schneerson, they always quote him, as part of the conversation. The Zohar, the Kabbalah, or, for Kabbalah. All that stuff is being included in the discussion here about aliens and Mars and everything else. And this is where I want to revisit some of the things that the late David Flynn wrote about, because, man, he was all over it, and from a long time ago. And I have the book here. This is the republished version. I think Tom Horn made a packaged version called the David Flynn Collection, where both Temple at the Center of Time, Newton's Bible Codex finally deciphered in the year 2012, and also Cydonia, the Secret Chronicles of Mars. And so there's a lecture from many, many years ago that David Flynn gave a presentation at, and I want to share a little bit of it here because, again, it's very similar to what these Journal of Astrophysicists are doing with the paper, where they're looking at images that are presented and analyzing them and connecting it to certain worldviews. David Flynn was very great at that. And he talked about the face on Mars and how it connects to the Bible, not just the Bible, but specifically to the cherub. And then I'll tie it back to China. If there's any connection whatsoever, it's not what you think, but here we go. Here's David Flynn many, many years ago.
This is a pathetic picture of the face from 1998. I remember being excited that day and coming to my computer and thinking, finally, we're going to see what's really there, and getting a strip of mud and having no idea what to do with it. And
first of all, David Flynn had a computer in 1988. That's pretty incredible to me.
Well, and Dan Rather that night was laughing. Obviously these people are kooks. Who can even look at this and have any sort of interest at all at it? If they'd if the mainstream media had waited till the year 2001, they would have seen this picture. This is from the Global Surveyor. And you can see unparalleled symmetry like Richard Hogan was talking about. It has dual features, though, which he's also brought into light, humanoid and lion. And this is my attempt to resolve both those features. This is an Olmec head from La Venta. They have a notorious head dress on and kind of square features. You'll notice the eye aperture is about the same size, same thing with the mouth. Not even the nose, but the lion side is what's really incredible. You have the eye, you have an ear, you even have a cheekbone, a nose, and that hair lip that the cats have. And here's a biblical precedent. In Ezekiel 41, where the prophet is actually seeing a picture of a future temple that hasn't been built yet, he describes the interior of this thing. It had been carved with cherubim, panels of wood with cherubim carved into them. And it said there were cherubs with two faces, and they had the face of a man toward one side and the face of a young lion toward the other side. It was made throughout the whole temple. This is another statue from La Venta, and try as I might, I couldn't get another picture of this face straight on, but you can use your imagination. This is the lion face, and this is a human face. And his attitude towards heaven very strongly implies that he has some connection with it. This is a picture of the tabernacle in the wilderness of the Israelites after they left Egypt. And that's an interesting thing, because when Israel named blessed his sons, he named images that they were to use for their symbols as they went out into the desert, and they would actually carry flags that represented their tribe with them. And they were arranged around their tabernacle according to their signs. And their signs actually fit, if you look into it, the zodiac signs. And the arrangement east to west of the tabernacle was that the entrance was always to the east, and the Holy of Holies was always to the west. And that's the same way with the actual temple in Jerusalem when it was finally built. But the most interesting part of this whole connection is its mirror with this face. Because if you look at the whole cycle of the zodiac, you'll notice that there's only one pure human, which is Aquarius, on the west, and one pure lion, which is Leo, on the east, which is exactly the orientation of the face and bilateral symmetry on Cydonia, Mars. And you'll notice on Jerusalem also, Golgotha, where the crucifixion happened, was on the west, and where the Messiah is supposed to come in the second advent on the Mount of Olives is on the east, as the conquering lion of Judah. An interesting thing about the Temple of Jerusalem was that Solomon conscripted the help of Hiram of Tyre. And Tyre was a major city in Cydonia at the time, and I'm sure that Tyre would have called himself a Sidonian king. He was responsible for actually making most of the temple and forming most of the temple and bringing the artisans to form the temple. And you can see inside this representation of what the Temple of Solomon looked like, cherubim, which if they're correct, they have human head, 4 parts of a lion, eagle wings, and a bull hind end. But it's kind of hard to tell. And here's the Holy of Holies with the Ark of the Covenant with cherubim. Cherubim were a really big deal. It demonstrates they understood the heaven chronometer. They understood how heaven worked. They knew that God was in charge of this, and they believed that every 6,480 years there would be some changeover. And it wouldn't be just a paradigm change. It would be a physical thing that would happen to mankind. And it wasn't pretty. And this is actually from the sarcophagus of Hiram from Tyre himself. He's actually entombed in this thing, and he's sitting on a cherubim. And using this theurgic idea of heaven is mirrored to the earth again, you can actually look at the most descriptive phrases in the Old Testament when it describes this actual entity, the greatest angel that existed. Most people think that when they talk about Lucifer, they're talking about maybe Satan as an illuminator. And the Gnostics believe that Satan, as Lucifer, was actually the God who was taking care of Adam and Eve to the point where he was teaching them their own divinity. That's the Gnostic version of Genesis 3. Christianity looks at that situation and realizes that man had everything before that interaction with this deity. There seems to be a a conflict that's been going on from the very beginning of history and is played out over and over again in recapitulation over and over again with the same symbol. And they always seem to point back to Mars. And uncannily, they point to Cydonia, even in ancient history.
So there you go. There's David Flynn talking about all that stuff. I mean, my goodness. The face on Mars, the half lion, half human face that mirrors the zodiac, but also mirrors the 12 tribes of Israel. And I know there's studies on that and other people who have kind of tried to debunk this. And it's one of those things where I think, I don't think it's like wrong that the 12 tribes may have been in reference to the zodiac per se, especially if it's part of the design of creation. It's sort of what's been hijacked for the wrong messaging that is the concern, not necessarily perhaps the patterns and, the constellations themselves. But, regardless, it's very fascinating stuff. It's a rabbit trail that I think everyone should go down if you were looking for a rabbit trail to go down. And the connection to China here it's kind of a crude one. I'm not saying that this is a great connection, but talking about the cherubim and having that lion, the guardian type of thing, China does have that in their mythology, and it has to do with the guardian lions. There's usually two set up on either side of the entrance of a temple, and one is male, one is female, and each of them have what appears to be like an orb under their paw, either their left paw or their right paw. And it's supposed to represent, harnessing, some celestial power or something like that. So, it's just interesting when you look at all the different cultures where you think they have nothing to do with each other. And clearly there are big connections when it comes to certain mythology, certain imagery, I guess, when it comes to, mythology, and especially creatures or entities that allegedly exist out there. So I think with the David Flynn thing too, the takeaway that it all, the conflict that recapitulates and it always points back to Mars, it just rings different in the year of 2023, where, Elon's continuing to push along his Mars thing, which a lot of that makes sense now. It's kind of like, you know why Elon's into Mars? I know exactly why, because he's probably fed all this stuff here. And also, there's another connection. Why is he so into Dogecoin? Why? It's a dog coin. Canaan, the canine. There's a whole connection there. Oh my gosh, my machine is not working. It's back. Okay. All right. Sorry about that. So I just wanted to share some old footage. If people are new, they're not familiar with this research, go check it out. It's just interesting that, the things that were talked about before with ancient history, again, think about it as narrative crafting. What narrative are they crafting to tell the masses? And what explanations biblically what might there be? And when it comes to these astrophysicists or whoever, the astrobiologists writing a paper, one from the Smithsonian Institute. So these aren't chumps. These are people that are pretty established in their field, suddenly start writing about, humanoids, bodies, bones, skulls, UFOs, UAPs, spacecraft wreckage on Mars. That's narrative crafting. They are crafting a narrative for everyone to swallow, and I just think we need to stay on top of it and keep a close eye, because you never know how they're going to pull off the Great Deception. It's supposed to be pretty deceptive. From what I read in the Bible, might deceive the elect there. So not that it will, but it could if possible. So it's a strong lie. Okay. Looking at the clock here, apologize. I know I probably shouldn't, but it is what it is today. Hopefully we'll get back to thanking everybody and back on track on Friday, or at the very least, I will try to do a better job of preparing everything so that we can get through the producers segment here. One quick thing here. I do want to mention this. This is a story that concerns gun control.
Gun violence is an epidemic. You think the deer are wearing Kevlar vests?
these jingles. And mind control.
Mind control weapons.
So there's been a bunch of shootings recently. And of course, this is like the year of the shootings, pre-election year. And I've seen reports of how we've had more mass shootings than ever before this year and that kind of talk. Now, over the weekend, there was a shooting at UNC, I believe the University of North Carolina, and it was a tragedy. Here's how WRAL reported on the victim of the shooting, and I'll talk a little bit about the implications and also the shooter in a moment here.
He was just the sweetest man.
Doug Christie says a brilliant mind is gone.
His contributions were, in my opinion, quite extraordinary. And I don't say that lightly.
Chrissy works for Tulane University in Louisiana, but says he knew Xi Jinping during their time at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in New York. That was from 2008 to around 2012-ish. But just last month, Chrissy says he was emailing with Yen about life and work when Yen emailed about a student.
He also said that he had a graduate student who was troubled with mental illness, and he had some delusions, and that he talked to his department about it.
But Chrissy only said a student, no specific name. WRAL has reached out to UNC Chapel Hill about this claim, but we haven't heard back.
I was worried, connecting the dots that, someone with a problem with mental illness, shot him.
He declined to share the email because he felt there were other personal things in it.
Okay, so they're honing in on the mental illness and delusions of the student. Now, I know there are other reports out there on this and digging into anytime a shooting happens, the internet, the truth seekers will all jump onto it and point out all the crazy discrepancies and strange things that are associated with any particular shooting. In this case, the shooter, his name is Qui, Q-I, or at least his last name is. And it's mentioned here that Qui was has a master's degree from Louisiana State University and a degree from Wuhan University in China, which is kind of interesting. Why does Wuhan, out of all the things, why would Wuhan pop up in this situation? And why is he murdering this professor? Was it really just like a personal vendetta or like a mental illness situation? Or was there something more going on? And again, I don't know, but let me finish this report from WRAL.
As for Yen, WRAL also heard from his former colleague, Bill Jameson, with Clarkson University in New York. That's where Yen was an assistant professor from 2015 to 2019.
He was a brilliant mind. He was working in a very cutting-edge area of material science, and he was just a great colleague and an inspiring teacher.
Cutting-edge area of material science. So he was doing some probably pretty important work. And I don't know to what degree. Are they talking, is it in the context of just university professors? Or was he being recruited for something bigger? Who knows? And with his perhaps Chinese ties, was he targeted by the CCP? Perhaps, there's all kinds of potential narratives here. But overall, it's always back to the guns, and it's the guns and guns and guns. But notice how the mainstream media is starting to combine the two. They are associating shooters, these mass shooters, with mental illness. It's something that truthers have pointed out for a long time. You got the psychotropic drugs, you got the mental disorders, all that stuff has been around for a long time. Now the media is picking up on it. Why? What's the timing? The timing is Second Amendment. Everybody who owns a gun has a mental illness. That's where this is going, right? So while it's true that all these shooters have some kind of mental illness history, or most of them do, and a lot of them have a history of some kind of association with intelligence officials or agencies, whether it's the FBI or whoever, they always have somebody or family or something linked to those institutions. and the mainstream media never talked about it, or they barely talked about it, or they'll mention it in a report, but not really make it the big deal. The big deal is guns. But now they're starting to talk about it. They're starting to bring people on, and it's this mental health thing. It's a mental illness, the delusions. This professor who got shot. He even talked about. He sent me an email about this guy who had a mental illness, and he was afraid of him. So it's just interesting. Again, we're always talking about narrative crafting. What are they trying to do? What are they trying to accomplish with the narrative? And it seems to me that they're trying to accomplish the narrative of, you are for the Second Amendment. You must have mental delusions. You must have an illness mentally. You must give up your gun now because you are deemed mentally ill. That's how they're going to try to disarm us. Because ultimately, think about this. If you are someone who is, full on Second Amendment, and, I'm pro Second Amendment. I know a lot of people listening and watching are. If it comes down to, hey, give us your guns or you're going to be labeled mentally ill, and they are going to come attack you, you know what's going to happen, right? The people that own the weapons will defend themselves. That's what the Second Amendment is for. So in that case, if this happens on a large scale, it's going to be very important for the mainstream and the public opinion at large to be, wow, look at the mental problems of this entire population. I think that's why they're pushing people to Christian nationalism and getting people to identify with those movements, is because it allows them to associate. And remember, if you guys remember the Christian nationalism breakdown that we did for Canary Cry Radio a few weeks ago, that was sort of the punchline too, was trying to associate mental illness with Christian nationalism. So I don't know. I know people must be talking about this. It's so obvious, but I don't know. Maybe we're the only ones yelling about this. So who knows? Maybe people in the chat can tell me. There has to be other people pointing out this pattern here, that ultimately they would like to associate all gun owners with mental illness. And ultimately also, if you're going to be treated for that, then, hey, get a VR headset that's connected, or maybe a brain chip, or there are all kinds of options for you at the soup menu of the dystopian future. I want to play one more clip because it's just so egregious. It's about the Maui fires. It's a report from local news, I believe. Here it is.
Evidence that could help determine the cause of the Lahaina fire
Sorry, I think you said evidence at the beginning there. Let me back it up, see if I can get it from the right beginning there.
Evidence that could help determine the cause of the Lahaina fire may have been destroyed. These new details, according to an email exchange between an attorney for Hawaiian Electric Company and other attorneys. 2 days after the wildfire devastated Lahaina, a group of attorneys notified the utility of the anticipated litigation. They asked that all electrical equipment that may relate to the origin of the fire, including power poles, lines, and conductors, be preserved. HECO's attorney responded, saying some potential evidence may have been compromised during the firefight. The court issued an interim discovery order on August 18th, directing HECO to preserve and protect all physical evidence within a defined area and refrain from destructive testing. Evidence that could help determine the cause of
looping. So there you go. Some evidence is destroyed. Convenient, isn't it? And yeah. Let's see. Okay. Well, I must get going. I apologize again for 2 short shows now. We had major problems on Monday. And I have not received any communication from the co-host today. So decided to just kind of run solo and at least get an episode out and cover a couple headlines out there and some rabbit trails. So again, I apologize for the short show. Not a whole lot of bells and whistles on this one. But just wanted to say thank you to all the producers. We will be officially thanking you properly in a future episode. And we appreciate it that, all the people who find value from the show give it back. We truly cannot exist without you. And I'll play that jingle and it'll be time to go.
Value for value. We take no money from corporations, commies, or cartels.
Yep, and all you got to do is go to canarycry.support.
Canarycry.support.
All right, everybody. Again, apologies for the shorter show. Apologies for all the lack of jingles and all the stuff. We will catch up on Friday. Until then, think outside the cage.